The Public Safety Committee will come to order. Thank you, members. Thank you, members of the public, for coming. Just wanted to announce the agenda for today. We are hearing hopefully two bills, a bill by Representative Lesch, House File 285, and a bill by Representative Simonson, House File 308, if we can get through it. Basically going to try to do the same thing we've been doing, I think, rather productively the last 2 days, which is to give the proponents of the bill about 25 minutes to make their case, including witnesses. If we have to go longer, we'll go longer, and then we'll give opponents the same opportunity if there is any time available for the public to testify on either of these bills only. We'll make that happen. We're going to go longer than our normal scheduled time, which is 11:30. We have the room until 12. After session tonight, legislative session tonight at the Capitol, we will come back to this room at 6 o'clock and hear the remaining bills, which are the another Simonson bill, House File 307, and a Houseman bill on House File 242. House File 294, a Rosenthal bill, has been removed from the agenda, as has House File 298. And then we will be done with these bills for the week, and we'll be done. I just want to say one thing real quickly. I'd like to thank my committee administrator, Laura Taken-Holtze, and my committee legal assistant or legislative assistant, DJ Danielson, who are sitting to my left here. They're new, although DJ's been at the legislature before, but they're new to the committee structure, and this is their initiation to the legislature, and they have done just an incredible job in trying to keep this all organized, and I hope working with all of you in a good way so we can have a civil discussion on a very contentious issue, and this has been hard to pull together. So I just wanted to say that. I wanted to also acknowledge that we have some students with us today from Best Academy Middle School in North Minneapolis. Many of them are in the audience back there, so if you can just welcome them, I'd appreciate it. Some of them are... Okay, with that, is there any questions before we begin? Representative Cornish.
Just that I did have a couple complaints that on the postings yesterday, they didn't make it on until late afternoon of the bills, and they were just, some people wanted it on earlier. I don't know what the limit was, but...
Ms. Taken-Holtz?
We were still finalizing the agenda. We did it as soon as we could. I had posted all of the bills early, and then I removed a couple of the bills later. I tried to get them up as soon as I could, so my apologies. It was an honest mistake.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. And to the members of the public also, and as the members know here, we're not taking any votes on these bills. We're not taking any amendments on these bills. We're here to hear the bills, and later in the month, a bill will be crafted that this committee will debate. So having said that, Representative Lesch, you are first, House File 285. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move House File 285.
Very good. Representative Lesch moves House File 285 for possible inclusion in the Gun Violence Prevention Bill, and we will lay that bill over after your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, House File 285 is the prosecutor's practical gun package. This is a package of proposals that are put together by the prosecutors, the county attorneys in the state of Minnesota to close some loopholes that I think the vast majority, nearly everyone should agree, should be closed and should be there to help us prosecute offenders and those who have been adjudicated in the state of Minnesota. These proposals only affect individuals that have already received their due process and either been found guilty, convicted, or had themselves ordered committed as a result of the fact that a judge found them a danger to themselves or others. So there really should be no objection by those who are law-abiding or those who have not been adjudicated. First, it ensures that we keep guns away from felony domestic violence offenders. Second, ensures we keep guns away from repeat juvenile offenders. Third, it ensures we stop the knowing transfer of guns to criminals. Fourth, it ensures that we conform with federal law in ensuring that ammunition is not possessed by offenders, those who have been already adjudicated, felons. And finally, fifth, it limits access to guns by those who have been found a danger to themselves or others and ordered, committed, however, have not actually been committed by the state. It closes that loophole. That's a broad overview, Mr. Chair, but I would ask Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman to come forward and explain why he put this together.
County Attorney Freeman. Welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, members, Representative Lesch, thank you very much for introducing House File 285, which we call the Practical Prosecutors Package. And the reason that we do that is because this legislation was drafted by prosecutors who every day prosecute people who commit violent crimes. And increasingly what we see is repeat offenders. And repeat offenders who are carrying weapons even though their status as felony deny them that right. This bill is really designed, as Representative Lesch has aptly pointed out, to reach out to make it more efficient for us to prosecute people who have already committed a crime of violence and who continue to possess a gun. These items have been vetted by your felony prosecutors throughout the state and unanimously recommended to you by the Minnesota County Attorneys Association. Let me jump right in, if I may. We first are trying to make, in order for a person to be declared a felon, they have to commit a certain crime of violence defined in the statute. When that statute was written, we didn't yet have something called domestic abuse by strangulation. This legislature hadn't passed that because, frankly, we prosecutors hadn't brought it to you yet. And we found in domestic abuse, excuse me, increasingly we have problems with domestic abuse by strangulation, a phone court. But that doesn't leave marks that are easy to see. And so if someone's hit over the head with a baseball bat or an arm is broken, it's much more difficult. But the strangulation sometimes can be more serious. This legislature wisely added that, but didn't include it in the definition of crimes of violence. Ergo, those folks who can be committed to that crime still can possess handguns. That's not a wise idea. We add that to the definition of violence. We also add felony domestic abuse, which again was inadvertently, in our view, not added. The second area is we're trying to do something about juvenile offenders. There's a very small number of juveniles who insist on carrying handguns, particularly in our cities. Okay? It's a crime, and under the juvenile system they can be found guilty of the felony because they can't carry guns. Now, let me quickly indicate an exception. Juveniles can carry long guns. They can carry their hunting weapons, and they have to go have gun safety courses just like my sons have gone through gun safety courses. But you can't carry a handgun. A kid can target practice, yes, but generally can't do it. We find the same kids are carrying that handgun over and over and over again. It's merely a felony in the juvenile system, and we can't, under present law, move that to the adult system after the fourth or fifth or sixth time. You may have seen that we recently got a guilty plea in the tragic death of Nizelle George. This young man had carried a gun over and over and over again. He shouldn't. And we should have the right in those extreme cases to move them into the adult system. That's what the juvenile part does. Number three, we want to stop the knowing transfers of guns from individuals who don't have a felony to a person who has a felony. It's kind of like you're at the crime scene or they're walking down the street and they know, the felon knows they can't carry a gun, so somebody else is carrying it next to them. But all of a sudden, they hand it to them, perhaps they're about to commit a crime. And hopefully before that crime is committed, the police stop them. Well, the felon has the gun and he can't have the gun and he's guilty of felon possession. But how about the person who just handed it to him? In the law, we call that aiding and abetting. And sometimes that's a person who assists in the crime. We want to make it aiding and abetting to hand the person to a felon when you know, and that's the burden of the prosecutors to prove, that that person can't hold a gun. Frankly, members, it will also help us in straw gun purchases. We see far too often someone being sent in, go buy me a gun. And to be frank about it, it's usually men often sending in their girlfriends. So they go buy a gun and give it to the felon, who may then too often commit an actual crime of violence with it. But that's the kind of straw purchases we ought to be able to do something about. Now, again, it's the burden of the prosecutor. We have to prove that she knew when she bought the gun and gave it to boyfriend he was a felon. And that's a challenge for us, but we'll take it. But this is one of the places where I think we don't want to have folks buying guns for felons like that. Okay? Fourthly, is a little aberration in the law. Felons can't carry a gun. That's what the law says. But too often, and particularly, let's be honest about it, in Minneapolis, there's a car that's pretty beat up, and there are 4 or 5 people in the car, and there's a reason to stop. And as they're stopped, a handgun goes flying out of the passenger side. That's because everybody in the car is a felon, and they know they can't possess the handgun. And we can't prove that case. You know, maybe in CSI you have fingerprints or DNA, but trust me, we don't have it on very many cases. It just doesn't, guns just don't hold that in many cases. We're stuck. But 3 of the 5 people in the car have ammo for that gun. Well, it seems to me that we ought to be able to get them for felons in possession, just like we get the people who actually have the gun. You know, we can't estimate to you how many cases, because frankly, we don't see them. But we know from talking to police officers, those cases are out there. And again, these are people who have already committed a crime of violence. And they may have possessed that gun, but we can't prove it because it went out the window. Well, now they're going to have to clean their pockets pretty fast at the same time. So that gives us another tool. Those are the 4 in the criminal code. Let me talk about the last one. And again, it's a narrow change that we're trying to make. That is in our commitment process. As you all know, a person's liberty can be taken away if they commit a crime, and we have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, which is absolutely mandated by our Constitution, and we prosecutors accept that. There are a series of people who have not actually committed a crime against someone who, because of their mental illness, their severe inebriety or drug habits, are a danger to themselves or others. That is the standard. And if we could prove that by clear and convincing evidence, we can also remove them from the streets. Usually what we do is to try to get them treatment, because these people haven't necessarily committed a crime. And in this country, we care a lot about liberty. So it's a high evidentiary standard, and it's a smaller group of people. But under our system, we present it to a judge, and the judge makes a determination, yes, they are of danger to themselves and others and need secure treatment. But before there's that finding of fact, the judge has concluded it. Before that judge commits that person to Anoka State Hospital, where the vast majority of them go, sometimes they have private insurance, and the defense attorney doing the job says, Your Honor, we'd like a stay of that commitment. We want to hold it in abeyance, because my client is going to go to a private hospital because his insurance will cover it, and so but they won't take someone under a commitment. We need to send them under a stay of commitment. Okay? In that case, some of us believe that those people can't carry guns. Others think they may be able to. We want to make sure those folks can't. Again, these are people who have been adjudicated by a judge, danger to themselves and others. This is a clarification. Those are the 5 pieces we have here. Members, you know, I had the wonderful privilege of serving 8 years in the Minnesota Senate. I know it's the other body, but it's the legislature like you all. This is a great opportunity that you have, but sometimes we just overlook things a little bit. So your prosecutors want your help to close these loopholes. We are convinced that there are people who are dangerous and on the street and have shown that by previous propensities that we want to get, and we ask your help. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, County Attorney Freeman. Representative Lesch, just a quick question. Do you have a fiscal note for this bill?
Mr. Chair, we do not yet have one.
And are you going to request one?
I believe one has already been requested.
Very good, thank you. Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that I hope this bill will not be part of the omnibus, but perhaps a standalone. Thank you.
Very good. Representative Kiefer, we'll all have an opportunity at the end of February to craft this bill, so you will have your input then.
Sure.
Representative Cornish.
Mr. Chair, Representative Lesch, this is the first bright hope that I've seen come through the committee here in the gun hearings, and I just want to let you know the reason I didn't sign on to this bill is there's a couple of little things that concern me, but I hope some of these things at least make it through. The NRA and the Gun Owners Alliance and I had all been accused of being paranoid and didn't want to sign on to bills, but this is one where we were attracted to. But the problem is some of the people that worked with you on this aren't really known as gun lovers, and we don't know what's going to happen. One word could change and change the whole context, and we just don't trust everybody. At least you, when you come up to me, I know if you're going to say you do what you mean, and it's not going to end up in something else. So in the future, I'd love to work with you and make sure some of these components come to a reality. So thank you.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to echo those comments. I think this is a common sense approach. It doesn't affect gun owners' Second Amendment rights. And I think some law-abiding citizens can probably support this bill. Now, I haven't read through the entire thing, but at first blush, this looks like it will have a positive effect on crime prevention, particularly in Minneapolis and other areas. So, like Representative Cornish says, this seems to be a common-sense approach, and it would be good if we can consider this separately in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Uglum. Any other questions of County Attorney Freeman? Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list is Councilmember Don Samuels. Mr. Olson, we'll give your side an opportunity to speak here. We'll do the same process we've been doing. That's okay. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Don Samuels.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much. Do I proceed?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, my name is Don Samuels, and I'm the council member in the 5th Ward in North Minneapolis. And I've been the council member for 10 years. Came to the council largely because of all the gunshots I heard around my house as a independent designer. I roused myself from my 30-year career and became an activist and ultimately became a council member for the area. I've heard gunshots in every city I've lived in across America. That is why the mayors against for gun control have such a different resonance than the rest of the country, because they deal with these things in the inner city police officers every day. And so that is why I brought these young people here today. Their principal, Eric Mahmoud, is over there. He should be proud because his children outperform the state in academics. And this is the highest performing group of African American kids in the state, and they outperform white kids in the state. And so we have great hope for them. There are 30 of them in the room. There's another 50 in the overflow room. And that is because we asked the girls not to come. Otherwise, we'd have 200 kids here today. They're here today because the young men you see in this room and who are in the overflow room are by far the most endangered human beings in any first world country in the world. Now, when you see the folks in this room from day to day, as this bill is heard, speaking about their need to protect themselves, the threat to their lives is minuscule, many, many times less than the threat to the lives of these young people every single day of their lives. This is real. And if you want to contemplate about how real it is, think about having your kid coming over to my house to spend a week. I live in the heart of it. And would you let them come for a week? They were born in it, and they live in it. So they are forming their minds around what America is, what society is, based on the realities they experience every day. And the hypervigilance that is developed in the minds of these children is a threat to their intellectual development. So it is a miracle that these children are excelling beyond the kids in the state, no matter what race they are. It is an absolute miracle, because a huge part of their brain is designed around vigilance and dedicated to scanning their environment to keep themselves safe. And they have no guns. These kids are not in a gang. They just want to be safe, to become engineers and doctors and pay our Social Security. That's all these kids want. Dignified young people. And so, I know this is not a controversial aspect of this whole set of hearings. And so I don't seem to need to convince anybody. So if you will allow me, let me just address some of the points as it relates to them.
Mr. Samuels, did you want to, I'm give you a little leeway here, but do you want to address the specifics
Yes,
of
Mr. Chair, I
the
will.
Lesch bill?
Yes.
Okay.
In the concept, the problem of, and by the way, Mr. Chair, yesterday when I briefed these young people about these hearings, I asked them, how many of you know someone who has been shot? And this is the response I got. So can you imagine when I had a group of 100 of them and saw like 90 hands go up? How awesome and awful that is. One of the problems for these kids is that they're young people, their age, who have a much different trajectory, who are carrying guns frequently. They get arrested, and they're back with another gun. They get arrested, and they're back with another gun. And so what has happened is, in the economy and the ecology of the neighborhood, these relatively small number of young people being basically invulnerable to the laws, we have a de facto legalization of guns for them. They can carry guns time after time after time. So what that does is, then they carry guns with impunity. And then they also then become the armor bearers for the folks who can't carry guns because they'll go to jail. Right? So they become the couriers for guns for these guys. And for a couple years there were all these young people walking around with backpacks in the middle of the summer. And very often their backpacks had guns in them. And they may or may not be using those guns, but they were the couriers for the guns. And because if they got caught, they wouldn't get in that much trouble. The other thing is that so then you have adults who are who would normally get in trouble, throw it out the window, as the county attorney said, and so they now are looking to children to do their dirty work for them, and then they become recruits for the gangs because they become useful, they become valuable members of that community. Mr. Chair, I'll just close by saying that as we talk about this issue, I ask you to remember, and these issues, I ask you to remember that we're trying to tell these kids, if you're in a confrontation situation, walk away. Don't stand your ground. Don't shoot first. Walk away. Follow Martin Luther King, Jr. He is your mentor. Turn the other cheek. because these children's lives are so dangerous that if we create a national ethic of revenge, standing your ground, being a man and be in somebody's face, then we will have a national disaster. Just imagine what would have happened in the South if Martin Luther King had said those things. We would have had a war on our hands in this country. So I ask you, I brought them so you could have a context of what we are creating, the culture we're creating, and to think of them as you talk about the laws and balance things. The rights to bear arms, balance it against the lives of these vulnerable children in the most violent of communities in our state. They are our children and they are our future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Samuels, thank you very much for your testimony and for your voice and leadership on this issue in Minneapolis. I appreciate it. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. What about this? Okay. Heather Martens, are you speaking as a proponent? No? No? Howard Vogel? That's it? Okay. And then Professor Olson, well, wait, before we do this, before I ask you to come up, is there anyone that's opposed to this bill that would like to testify? Or am I missing any proponent? Let me start there. Am I missing any proponents of the bill that had wanted to testify? Proponents. Okay, then opponents, and I understand, Representative Olson, you're now a proponent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lesch, members of the committee. My name is Joseph Olson. I'm a law school professor at Hamlin University, and I'm also president of the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance. Today I'm here in that capacity. There are a couple of concerns that we have about this bill. In the handout that was around the Capitol last week from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, they made it very clear that they were concerned about repeat juvenile offenders. And they wanted to make sure that they were able to deal with repeat juvenile offenders. Unfortunately, I don't see anywhere in the bill the word repeat. I would suggest that an appropriate place to deal with that would be to add on line 2.8 in front of 624.713 the words second or subsequent conviction or something along those lines, and I'll be happy to work with
Mr. Olson, we caught that too, and Mr. Diebel is going to come up with the appropriate language.
Oh, good. Well, fine. The part of our reason for being concerned with that is there are lots of young men who live on farms in Minnesota who have lots of territory to go out and shoot, and some of them go out and shoot when they're 16 on their own property, miles away from anybody else, behind berms that their parents have created. But since the problem is going to be solved, I think that's fine. The other concern we have is with, actually I don't have it. Mr. Freeman answered my question. So we don't oppose this bill, and on looking at the final version of it, we may well come out to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Olson, for your testimony. County Attorney Freeman, are you still here? Let's just try to see if we can resolve this now. We don't have to make an amendment to the bill, but Mr. Diebel, can you just So what we were wondering is why can't you certify a juvenile who violates the prohibition against possession of a firearm under current law?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
The question is, why can't you certify a juvenile who violates the provision against possession of a firearm currently?
It's our, Mr. Chairman, it's our understanding we cannot Normally, the certification process only occurs when the child, the juvenile, has been either charged with a very serious crime like a murder or a series of crimes. Okay? And what we are trying to do here in this bill is to have the juvenile possessor of guns on numerous occasions be eligible for that certification. Under present law, we do not believe that they are. I think Professor Olson has raised a good issue that, you know, if I could tell a real brief story, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
My very first bill in the Minnesota Senate was brilliant. It was just stellar. And I brought it to the committee, and Chairman Spear, Senator Peterson, now on the Court of Appeals, Senator Miriam, inducted into the Lawyers Hall of Fame, although he's an accountant, proceeded to amend the heck out of my bill, and I was really angry. And afterwards, Senator Miriam said, Senator Freeman, there's never been yet a bill in this legislature that couldn't stand some improvement, so settle down, young man. So I welcome the thoughts and the comments, and I think having the repeat offender would be good for this bill, just like the changes were good for my bill some 30 years ago.
Very good. Thank you, County Attorney Freeman. Any other people who want to testify on this bill? Introduce
Chairman,
yourself for
Chris
the record,
Rickard,
please.
National Rifle Association.
Welcome to the committee.
Members, I think you've heard me say many times I've sat up here the last couple of days that the bills before you weren't real solutions, but I think there are definitely aspects in this bill that are real solutions that can be worked on in a bipartisan fashion, and the NRA looks forward to working with members of both sides of the aisle on a number of the provisions within this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Rager. Anybody else? Wow, we're just moving right along. This is a little different. Okay, Representative Lesch, do you have any closing comments?
Mr. Chair, no. But while you're ahead, Mr.
All right. All right. The chair will lay over House File. The chair will lay over House File 285. Thank you, Representative Lesch. The next bill on the agenda is House File 308. Representative Simonson.
That's a caliber.
Representative Simonson, you want to move your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move House File 308.
Okay, so Representative Simonson moves House File 308 for possible inclusion in the gun violence prevention bill.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to offer a author's amendment to get the bill in the shape that I would like it. And I apologize for the short notice, but it just came to my attention.
Okay. Is this something that we can do orally?
I think so. Starting on line 3.33.
Okay.
After the word system, we would insert a period and then strike on 333 and 334 the words "and the National Instant Criminal Background Check System." And as I understand it, it was just pointed out to me by the Department of Public Safety and the BCA that this type of check is not allowed in issuing a permit for body armor.
Is this the only amendment?
That's correct.
Okay, so Representative Simonson moves on line 3.33 that after the word system, insert period and delete "and the national" on line 3.33 and instant criminal background check system on line 3.34. Any discussion on that amendment? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion prevails. Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for hearing this bill. My intent with this bill is to try to take a little bit different approach to some of the things that we're trying to prevent. So hopefully that this will be a little bit different style of a discussion than we've had over the last couple of days, but I look forward to it. I think that in the interest of making the best sense of this bill, I would like to talk first about the provisions within the bill specifically, followed by perhaps a few comments as to why I find this issue to be not only important, but likely relevant to what I hope will be an eventual gun violence protection bill. To the bill specifically, the bill will create a mechanism where a permit would be required to purchase, own, possess, or use body armor. There would be no grandfather clause. The bill will exempt licensed peace officers, correctional officers, and correctional agents. The bill will also exempt those persons who wear body armor that is provided by peace officer for the person's safety or protection during transport or while accompanied by a peace officer. It would exempt those persons who possess body armor while acting in a confidential or as a confidential informant or a witness engaged by a law enforcement agency, and would also exempt a member of the National Guard or a reserve component or an active duty member of the United States Armed Forces who is on active service as defined in statute. This bill will define the term body armor as personal protective body covering used either alone or with other clothing. It would define it to be designed and made of any material or combination of materials to prevent, resist, deflect, or deter the penetration of the material by a dangerous weapon. The bill further would establish penalties for those individuals that purchase, possess, or use without the proper permit. Those penalties would include a first offense as a misdemeanor, a second or subsequent violation as a gross misdemeanor, and a person with a prior felony conviction for a crime of violence would be guilty of a felony. With respect to the process of applying for the permit in the bill, it is generally modeled after the existing permit to carry law with one exception. That is that when the applicant resides in a jurisdiction that has a chief of police of an organized full-time police department, the applicant shall apply with said police chief. When there is no such police chief, application shall be made to the local sheriff. The idea here is to provide further local controls, and in such an area that has a police chief, it is likely the police department that is more likely to know more about said applicant. The permit itself shall be issued if background investigation is passed, the body armor is likely to be used in a safe and lawful manner, and the applicant has reasonable need for protection provided by the body armor. The bill provides for permit fees. The chief or the sheriff may charge, it's not mandatory, but they may charge for a new application the direct cost of processing the permit application or $100, whichever is less. The permit itself will expire after 5 years, again consistent with our carry permit law. With respect to due process, any person that would be aggrieved by a denial or a revocation of a permit may petition the district court. Now, to answer the question, why am I bringing this forward? Body armor was designed to protect and should be reserved for the brave members of the military and law enforcement community who put their own lives at risk to protect others. It should not be available to those who might prey on the vulnerable and defenseless. Body armor can embolden criminals to take greater risks than they might without it. This could lead to an increase in the number of innocent citizens whom are either direct or indirect victims of violent crimes. Body armor, members, makes it far more difficult for law enforcement or possibly permit to carry holders to neutralize violent offenders. We currently have a law in the books that makes it a felony to commit either a gross misdemeanor or a felony while wearing or possessing a bullet-resistant vest. I don't think this is enough. We do have an opportunity here to act in a preventive and proactive manner, and the reality, I believe, is that outside of the provisions we have built into this bill, the average citizen really does not have the need for these types of products. So what are we trying to prevent? And I think that probably is the question before each of us this entire week. We must consider the value of prevention, which is often measured in unknown quantities. We will never likely know of the homicide prevented by our actions. I anticipate questions about the lack of empirical data that body armor somehow contributes to violent crimes. The fact is, members, sometimes we make decisions based on what is right. We may have an opportunity here by taking this step to prevent one day someone from making that critical decision, that decision to commit mass murder or a single murder, to inflict bodily harm, to destroy families, to attack our freedom to live. Is it not possible that the presence of, or lack thereof, this body armor could influence such a decision? I venture to say yes. Consider some of these facts, members. December 14th, 2012, Sandy Hook Elementary School. Adam Lanza, armed with a .22 caliber rifle, killed his mother in her home in Newton, Connecticut. Lanza then stalked his mother's car with firearms and drove to Sandy Hook Elementary School. Wearing a bulletproof vest, he forced his way into the school and opened fire with a .223 Bushmaster semi-automatic assault rifle, equipped with a 30-round large-capacity ammunition magazine, killing 26, including 20 students ages 6 and 7. As police closed in, Lanza committed suicide by shooting himself with a handgun. The question I ask is, what if he didn't have the bulletproof vest? What if that was one of the tools that was not available to him? Might that have influenced his decision on that day? What if Lanza didn't decide to take his own life with a handgun? Would that not have had an impact on the outcome if police were unable to take him out because he was wearing a bulletproof vest? July 20th, 2012, Aurora, Colorado. 15 minutes into the midnight premiere screening of Batman: The Dark Knight Rises, on a man clad in body armor and wearing a gas mask enters the Century Aurora 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado through an emergency exit. After tossing 2 canisters of tear gas into the theater, he began firing upon the audience. The gunman first used an AR-15 type assault rifle equipped with a 100-round drum large-capacity ammunition magazine. After the assault rifle jammed, he then continued with a 12-gauge shotgun, killing 12 and wounding 58. Again, my point is a man clad in body armor. On Wednesday, October 12, 2011, at 1:21 in the afternoon, police responded to reports of shots fired at the Salon Meritage Hair Salon at 500 Pacific Coast Highway in Seal Beach, California. The alleged shooter was armed with 3 handguns and reloaded at least once during the attack, which lasted 2 minutes. There were about 20 people in the salon at the time, some managing to escape by running into the street or hiding in neighboring businesses. 6 people were declared dead at that scene, and 3 survivors were taken to a hospital where 2 of them later died of their wounds. This individual was wearing body armor at the time of his arrest. On April 4th, 2009, in the Stanton Heights neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, an incident stemming from a mother and her 22-year-old son's argument over a dog urinating in the house. At approximately 7:11 a.m., 22-year-old individual opened fire on 2 Pittsburgh police officers responding to a 911 call from the individual's mother, who was attempting to get the police officers to remove her son from the home. Unable to secure the scene, the 2 police officers shot in the head, bled out for 4 hours while the shooter and police exchanged fire. According to Pittsburgh Police Chief Nathan Harper, this individual was armed with a semi-automatic AK-47 style rifle, a shotgun, and 3 handguns. He was protected by a bulletproof vest and had been lying in wait for officers. According to police and witnesses, he held police at bay for 4 hours as the fallen officers were left bleeding nearby, their colleagues unable to reach them. More than 600 rounds were fired by the SWAT teams and this individual. This individual had gunshot wounds in his legs but was otherwise unharmed because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. On April 3rd, 2009 in New York, about 10:30 in the morning, individual barricades the rear door of the Binghamton American Civic Association building with a vehicle registered in his father's name. This individual had taken English language classes there from January to March before dropping out. He shot students and a teacher who were in his former classroom. The shooter killed 13 people and wounded 4 others. He was described as wearing a bulletproof vest and a bright green nylon jacket. Finally, Mr. Chair, on February 28, 1997, North Hollywood, California, about 9:15 in the morning, 2 men entered and robbed the North Hollywood Bank of America branch. These 2 men were confronted by LAPD officers. When they exited the bank, and a shootout between the officers and robbers ensued. The 2 men attempted to flee the scene, one on foot and one in the getaway vehicle, while continuing to engage the officers. The shootout continued onto a residential street adjacent to the bank until one individual was mortally wounded, including by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The other individual was killed by officers 3 blocks away. Both individuals were protected by body armor, which could not be penetrated by the officers' handgun and shotgun ammunition. Now, since this bill has been made public, I have had a number of conversations with Representative Schoen about a concern in the bill, and we're in agreement that one of the things that we do not address in this bill that we are more than willing to work on is possible provision for EMS personnel and firefighters to wear body armor, or at least have access to body armor in an affordable manner. I understand that is a need, and definitely want to work on that going forward as we talk about inclusion in this omnibus bill. This particular bill is supported by the Minnesota Police Chiefs Association. The testifier I had planned on having here today is unable to be here, but he does send his support of House File 308. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation. Representative Cornish.
Well, Mr. Chair and members, this isn't one of those bills I get all worked up about, but a number of things concern me, I guess, is that victims of domestic abuse, you and I both are concerned about victims of violence, women, and I know a number of them that have worn vests to subject them to background checks and permit fees up to $100, I think would be a little outrageous. I've got 3 different vests at home that I wear, and I know different members of our House of Representatives chairs over the years have been escorted to the room and wearing bulletproof vests. And so there's all sorts of exceptions, I would think. There's neighbors that have been threatened by neighbors, and the neighbor isn't far off enough to the into Never Never Land to commit, but still makes real credible threats, and that they would like to wear. I just have a really hard time with subjecting the common citizen that wants to wear protection with, and if the chiefs can charge $100, they'll charge $100, if that's the limit. And so background checks and $100 permit lasting for 5 years for citizens just seems a little bit overboard for the amount that we really can absolutely prove that of deaths that it would stop. So that would be my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Cornish. We have a few more questions for you. I don't know if you want to address that now, or do you want to wait? Go ahead.
I just assume now, Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Chair, Representative Cornish, I don't disagree with some of the things that you're saying. I personally would just assume we didn't have a fee, but I'm also not a big proponent of unfunded mandates either. So, but I'm very receptive to the comments that you make, and again, would be more than willing to sit down and talk about some alternatives or some provisions that we could do. I think, at least I hope you understand what I'm trying to accomplish here. So,
Representative Johnson, then Lesch.
Just have a couple comments and questions.
Representative Johnson, could you just move your mic down a little bit? Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just have a couple comments and questions. As one of the questions I had that you have covered was the EMS and Representative Schoen should have been, I'm sure understands the need for EMS to wear them. Also, most law enforcement agency after the bank robbery in Los Angeles, they changed their training tactics. We now plan, whether they have the body armor or not, we plan that when we're in these unfortunate encounters to deal with suspects that we do have to use deadly force against, that they are wearing body armor, and we plan for that and train for that. So that generally that issue has been taken care of by our training. Another issue that we have is, I don't know if you're aware, there's a number of NFL quarterbacks that wear body armor when they're playing to help deflect the blows when they're sacked. Are these NFL quarterbacks that do not live in the state, what is the process for them to get these permits to wear that body armor during the game?
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. With respect to the NFL question, I hadn't thought of that. And it's a good question. But again, I'm wanting to be very reasonable here, and I hope you'll understand what my intent is, not to prohibit such individuals who have such a need from obtaining the body armor, if that indeed is what the need is. So I'm more than willing to talk about options or alternatives to that point.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I just have one more comment. This morning, but because the bill was put on the agenda so late, I did not have time to contact a couple of police chiefs in my area. I was able to do that this morning, and in talking to them, neither one saw any need for this bill.
Very good. Thank you. Representative Lesch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Simonson, I just wanted to alert you to one potential issue. In terms of your exemptions, you have members of the military exempted as long as they're on active service as defined under 19005, subdivision 5. And that, I have body armor out in my car right now. It's in my A bag, and I got to bring it to drill this weekend. But as of right now, I'm not traveling to or from duty. I'm not otherwise requested by state authority. I'm not at an encampment, and I am not working on behalf of the state at a public disaster unless this hearing can be considered. So you may want to tweak that, and I think you will.
Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Simonson, for bringing this forward. I understand the intent. My question sort of dovetails off Representative Cornish's. What if an individual is threatened and they report it to the police, but they don't want to escalate it and actually have to charge the person for fear of the situation growing more volatile? How does this bill address that, or does it?
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, I'm not 100% sure I fully understand the question, but could you just elaborate on the word charge?
Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Simonson, say I'm threatened by an individual, and I'm scared for my life. I contact the police, but in order for the police to act, they'd have to bring a charge against an individual of terroristic threats, let's say. But I don't want to escalate it at that point, but I am concerned for my safety and might want to wear a vest. What would my options be in that situation?
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative, and thank you for the clarification. There are options built into the bill that allows law enforcement to work with individuals such as that to allow for a provision to use body armor without the necessary steps of getting a permit.
Representative Schoen, and then Newberger.
He was first.
Oh, okay. Representative Newberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Representative Schoen. Guess I'll have to be nice to you today. Representative Simonson, I'm looking at this bill, and I can see the heart of it. I do. But sometimes I think we need to think this through a little better. I see the overall feel of this is I can agree with. But when I step back from what I feel and what I see, it appears that we are punishing the supermajority of citizens for the heinous actions of a few. That's kind of the overall feel that I get for this. We are denying citizens a right to protection that they already have. Now we have to jump through a legal hoop to sustain that. The other big problem that I have is personal. In my office right now, as we speak, on my shelf is a World War I Army helmet. My grandfather wore in World War I in service of this country. Well, I need to get a permit for that because by your criteria, I now have body armor. There is an enormous military collectors industry out there, World War I, World War II, you name it, helmets and other types of what we call body armor. And now, having Grandpa's World War II Army helmet, if I get caught with that, that's a misdemeanor. This isn't addressed in this bill either. Historical artifacts. And the other thing that, there's a number of major things, but the other thing that I want to bring up here as well is these vests are made out of, basically made out of thousands of layers of microfiber Kevlar. If you're going to force people by the thousands to turn these things in if they don't want to get a permit for it, you're going to have a stack of these things. How are you going to dispose of these? Who's going to pay for that? Is there a fiscal note attached to this? If you take a couple warehouses full of Kevlar vests, what do you do with them? These are perfectly good Kevlar vests, by the way. That question hasn't been addressed either, the environmental impact of this and the cost for disposing of these. That I think, in my opinion, that I don't think that this bill is necessary. I do, like I said, I understand the feeling of this bill, and my heart agrees with it. But once I start to think this through a little bit more, I think that this bill starts to create more problems than it would solve. With that, I'm done. Thank you.
Representative, do you want to respond? Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Newberger, I want to thank you for making my point exactly to the first part of your comments, at least, because I think that there's some misconception out there amongst the public based on the quantity of input that we've all had over the last couple of days, that just because this is in writing in this form today, that this is going to be the final form that ends up being signed into law. I think we all know that this may never make it to the House floor, and even if it did make it to the House floor, there's no guarantee that it would be taken up in the Senate. And even if it was and we came to an agreement, there's no guarantee the governor would sign it. But to your point, I think the absolute intent of a majority of the bills that we're talking about this week is to generate conversation. I don't disagree with you that we shouldn't be hasty, and sometimes we have to sit down and we think it through, but that is why we are here. That is why we have this deliberative process in front of us, so that we can, and I respect your input, and I think your points are well taken. And again, I will offer to you and to anybody, let's work together on this and see if we can come up with something that's reasonable. To the point about what is the value of preventive measures, how many people do we force to, get a permit in order to prevent one or how many senseless killings? And I think I tried to make that point that we will never know the answer to that question. We will never know how many people changed their mind that day before they got up and left the house that morning about what they were going to do based on the tools that they had with them. I personally think it's a reasonable approach, but I also I'm not naive enough to think that I have all the answers, and I'm willing to work on this. To the point about the cost, it was my understanding, or at least my thought process, was that anybody that currently owns body armor probably doesn't want to turn it in. They probably have it for a reason, and they want to keep it. And I'm more than willing to sit down and talk about how we structure this fee, because I'd be willing to waive the fee, but I don't think local law enforcement's going to be very happy about that. But we can work on that. The fiscal note I have not requested, but if we get into a scenario at the end of this where it looks like there's going to be either a local cost or a state cost, we absolutely will do that. And again, I just want to make sure that you understand that I'm open to coming up with a solution that works.
Representative Schoen. Representative Newberger, follow-up.
Thank you. I just wanted to see what your thoughts were. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to see what your thoughts were, Representative, about the World War II and World War I, or the military artifacts. What are your thoughts on that?
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Newberger, thank you for reminding me. That slipped my mind. That is a great point, and that is also a great point as I better not be careful not to stray away from the topic of the bill, but it is a great point because I think that in certain instances like the one that you described, we have to have a provision in the bill to address that. And again, I'm more than willing to do that. We have obviously a number of people that have collector's items on various things that we're talking about this weekend, and that is one of the things that we need to address somehow in this final omnibus bill, so that we're not punishing the law-abiding citizen.
Okay. Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair, and just as a co-author on this bill, I kind of want to make a couple comments. I wish Representative Cornish was still in the room if he isn't, but, making the blanket statement that if a chief can charge the fee, he will. I'd like to point out in Washington County, Sheriff Bill Hutton is one of the lowest prices for a permit to carry holder fee in the state because he charges what he needs, not what he can. So that's not completely true. Related to the training tactics, I agree with Representative Johnson. We do train that way. Representative Johnson, both are in law enforcement. One of the things I would like to say is that we train to shoot to center mass, and that's what bulletproof vests have done. When you are an average citizen in your home and somebody breaks in, they don't have the same training that we do. It doesn't work out that way. Some of the folks in this crowd probably do because they focus on it in a very heavy way, but they don't get the opportunity to train on a quarterly, monthly basis like some of us get to, where we use those alternative tactics to try to defeat that threat. I'm very pleased to hear Representative Newberger concerned about the environment and mental health care this week as well too. And I look forward to working with you on that to maybe move some of those health care initiatives through as well. So, in my career, doing search warrants and walking into a house and getting into a closet and finding a bulletproof vest and a ski mask together is one of the most disturbing things that a police officer will find outside of a dead body. There are plenty of other things that are problematic, and there's no doubt about it, but this is one of those things that sends a shiver up and down your spine when you stop that carload of folks that are cruising around a neighborhood, and there's that bulletproof vest and a ski mask. It doesn't make sense. Something's not right. And exactly to those points when you do get in that shootout or you confront that individual, these are some of the focuses that are very important. And outside of some of the other measures that we take up, this is a solid one. This is good. And I appreciate that Representative Simonson has taken a good, strong effort to say, this isn't perfect. Like County Attorney Freeman said, no bill that comes before any committee is going to get out of the state legislature without some improvements. And I look forward to working with you on doing that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone, any proponents? Representative Kelly? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Simonson, I'm just wondering if maybe a different approach, because it appears as you're listening to all the questions, there's more exceptions that are out there that we just never even thought of, the military equipment that is out there. But have you thought about maybe taking a different approach of enhancing the penalties for someone similar to like just our previous legislation, to enhance the penalty as opposed to trying to strip away rights of the private individual for someone wearing body armor?
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. I did have that thought. Originally, that was my thought, was that we would just increase the penalty. But then I shifted gears and I moved into the mindset of trying to do something different under the guise of preventive medicine, if you will. And that's really what I'm trying to do. To me, we can have the stiffest penalty in the world tied on to what happens to an individual when they commit a felony wearing body armor. But at that point, it really is too late. And that's what really the intent of my bill is to be preventative. So thank you.
Thank you. So you have no testifiers on your bill, and is there any proponents that would like to speak in favor of this bill? Then we will give the opponents. If there are any opponents, please come up. Welcome to the committee. Please give your name for the record.
Andrew Rothman, representing the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance.
Welcome.
This bill doesn't need tweaking. It doesn't need fixing. It doesn't need adjustment. It doesn't need additional exceptions. It needs to be withdrawn. It needs to be thrown away, burned, and stomped on and never seen again. This bill is based on fantasy and imagination and conjecture. It is a solution in search of a problem. I'm not aware of any incidents in Minnesota involving the use of body armor in a crime. Furthermore, Representative Simonson seems to have gotten some incorrect information on a couple of cases. First of all, in Connecticut, the murderer in Connecticut, who I won't dignify with a name, was not wearing body armor, was not wearing a bulletproof vest. Connecticut State Police spokesman Lieutenant J. Paul Vance on December 27, 2012, in a statement said that that killer was wearing a fishing-type vest, a jacket with a lot of pockets. If you look over to my left, you can see one of the members of the press who's wearing a jacket exactly like that. It's good for holding onto lenses and cameras and fish hooks, but it has nothing to do with protection. In Aurora, Colorado, similarly, the murderer in Aurora, Colorado, was not wearing bulletproof armor, was not wearing body armor of any sort. He was wearing a Black Hawk urban assault vest. Now, I understand, like assault weapons, it is black in color and it has a lot of buckles on it and may look scary. But we'll be talking about what body armor costs. Here's the exact make, model, and color that the murderer in Colorado was using. This is the Black Hawk urban assault vest. And if you want to be a tactical Tommy, if you want to look very cool with your friends, you can absolutely wear one of these. But it's a nylon vest with a lot of pockets in it. You can have your lighter over here, and you can have your chewing gum over there. It has nothing to do with personal protection of body armor. But more importantly, I am outraged. I'm appalled at Representative Simonson's contention that only the police and the military deserve this sort of protection. Body armor is inherently defensive in nature. You cannot hurt somebody with body armor. Certainly, you could commit a crime with body armor, and if someone does that, we ought to prosecute them. It's already a felony. It's already 5 years under Minnesota state law. This is not a problem that needs fixing.
Thank you, Mr. Rothman, for your testimony. Anybody else who is opposed to this bill? You can come down to, sir. We'll wait for this gentleman, and then you can come next. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Eric Bekeezer. I am a security consultant with over 25 years of experience in law enforcement and private security. I am also currently the Director of Public Safety for a higher education institution here in Minnesota. Looking at this bill, I have to tell you, I just fought for funding and equipping of the officers on my department with body armor. Our college administration does not allow our officers to be armed, and we are the only first responders to an emergency on our campus. and I went through a very lengthy discussion about equipping my officers with body armor, and was finally able to get it done. These are real people with families that expect them to come home at the end of the day. We spent roughly $800 per officer on the body armor, and if this law had been in effect at the time, I'm not convinced that my administration would have let me equip my officers with body armor. We're talking about a $100 fee for on top of the $800 vest that would need to be purchased. This law has no provision in it. This proposal has no provisions in it for grandfathering, as Representative Self mentioned. I myself spent 11 years in the military. I have several different items which could be considered body armor under this law. One of them is a slightly damaged PASGT vest that was used to stop a 60-millimeter mortar fragment that blew me off my feet in Panama in 1989. I really don't want to give that up to anybody. I'd really like to keep that, and I don't see how, as a veteran who that happened to, that I should be expected to have to pay a $100 fee to do that. Everybody has the right to be safe, and I think that when it comes to body armor, like Mr. Rothman said, we're dealing with more fantasy than reality here. As someone who's done law enforcement, investigated traffic accidents, one of the most frustrating things I ever hear is the fallacy, the imaginary idea that a seatbelt will trap you in a burning car and you shouldn't wear a seatbelt for that reason. We know that's not true, and the idea that body armor somehow creates invulnerable killing machines is also not true. Proper law enforcement training, like the training I've done personally, I've done active shooter training for the Minneapolis SWAT team, for the U.S. Marshal Service here in the Twin Cities. I do active shooter training with my own officers. Proper training can defeat an aggressor, and what we were lacking in places like Sandy Hook and Aurora and elsewhere, sometimes the proper training worked in some cases, the proper training didn't work in others. You mentioned North Hollywood. North Hollywood happened in 1996, I believe, a long time ago, and as a result of that, we've changed our tactics in law enforcement to deal with situations like that. Officers have better firepower now, they have better weapons, and officers are trained to operate in small, organized teams to deal with determined active shooters. Those training improvements have saved lives. But coming back to the point, there's many legitimate reasons why people would have body armor. We've talked about personal defense. My officers wear it at work. And you don't have to be a public safety officer to need body armor in the course of your job. You could be a clerk at a gas station who works the night shift. You could be a guy who takes money out of vending machines, makes the rounds of vending machines and takes money out. Anyone who is in a high-risk position where they're handling money or have another high-risk job, body armor can work to their benefit. Armored car guards wear body armor. There's no provision in this bill for them to have it. I was a firearms instructor. I wear body armor on the range, working with my students. My other instructors also wear body armor on the range. This is just a simple protection in case to help reduce our risk. We also encourage our students to wear body armor when appropriate. These are ordinary people that want to get training. I wear body armor whenever I go deer hunting. Not only does it protect me from potential accidents, it also keeps me warm. So I like it for that. When police explorers, police reserve officers go on ride-alongs, go with police officers, many times they will wear body armor. We mentioned EMS and fire folks wearing body armor. And then one of the things I have a piece of body armor in my house for, I use it as a safe backstop when clearing my firearm. When I have a permit to carry, and when I come home, I want to render my firearm safe and put it in my gun locker. I use an old ballistic vest for that purpose, and now we're saying I'd need to get a $100 fee for this obsolete vest. So I agree with Mr. Rothman. I think that this law discriminates against people who want to protect themselves. This $100 fee does not support the working class who want to protect themselves. Giving the police chief the authority to determine if someone needs or does not need body armor to protect themselves in the course of their employment isn't right. And I just don't see how this will solve any problems at all. I see how it will endanger a lot of people and we talked about protecting vulnerable people. Those are the people getting the body armor. That's what we're getting it for, is to protect ourselves, protect our families, protect our coworkers, and this takes that level of protection away. Body armor is not offensive, it's defensive. It's like wearing a seatbelt. And this is essentially a law that tells us we can't wear a seatbelt because it's too dangerous.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Simonson, members of the committee. My name is Joseph Olson. Body armor is 100% defensive. I know that police officers use it regularly. I used to be on the Police Civil Service Commission in my city. And I also know that police officers tend to mix with people in society who are generally engaged in some sort of criminal activity. So, for example, the police in my town have never been in my house. So they don't know that I have a ballistic vest. They don't know that I keep it next to my bed where I keep my Glock, and when things go bang in the night, I put it on and I pick up the gun and I go and investigate. You can't call the police every time the garbage bag falls off the counter. But I am not going to go walking around my house at night if there might be someone in there without protecting myself. Certainly no police officer would come to my house and clear it without a vest and a gun. So I have the same needs that they do. I also teach firearms instruction. Students can do the strangest things. I don't know how many of you have taught firearms instruction. I wear a vest when I teach the range portion of it. Because I once had a person stand in front of me with a .22 revolver and point it at me and go click, 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 it won't work. I moved the revolver out of the way, and we dealt with the problem, which was that his firing pin had broken, thank God. But there are lots of people who need these vests. I also use my vest when I go hunting. It's heavy, it's hot, it's a pain to wear, but we all know every hunting season 5, 6, or a dozen hunters get shot in accidental shootings. Well, if you had a vest on, you would either prevent yourself from being injured, or you would substantially reduce the amount of injury that you suffered, and you might actually be able to walk out to safety. But it's my choice to wear something that I spent money on, to wear something that's uncomfortable, because it's purely defensive. It doesn't threaten anyone. And of course, I also use mine as a backstop when I'm clearing firearms in my house. It's much safer than putting bullet holes through the wall in your basement, which I know people have done. There are lots of legitimate reasons why civilians would own these things, a great many legitimate reasons. So I oppose this bill because it goes too far. I oppose this bill because it has a reasonable need requirement. We're going to have 465 sheriffs having a different view of reasonable need. This is the same kind of standard that we had before 2003 with regard to carry permits. And what it means is that there will be absolutely no consistency and no fairness across the state of Minnesota with respect to who gets one of these permits. I mean, we had 20 years of experience with the carry permit. There was no consistency and no fairness. When you put in something like reasonable need, even if you put the word shall in front of it, it means whatever the police chief thinks is a reasonable need. And we have some police chiefs who think no civilian could possibly need a vest, and we will have other police chiefs who think that every civilian who wants a vest can have a defensive tool. I noticed the fee is $100. It's $100 in the carry permit law too, and it's amazing how fast maximums become minimums. If you look at the data that's collected by the BCA on the permit system, there are dozens of sheriffs in counties all over Minnesota who have $50,000 or more in their permit fees funds because they've been overcharging. They all went to $100. They charged $100 until the last election 2 years ago. And now some of them have been lowering it to meet the law, which says you have to charge the actual cost. I think we're going to have the same problem here with untrammeled discretion. We're going to have the same problem here with outrageous cost. We're going to have the same problem here with the lack of recognition that the good people of this world have the same right to wear a vest designed to protect their life that a policeman or a fireman or an EMS person does. My life is not worth less because I'm a retired firefighter. It's not worth less because I don't do EMS work anymore. It's not worth less because I happen to be a tax-paying citizen. This is based on a misconception that people use vests in Colorado and Connecticut, which they didn't. They used photographers' vests. So the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance opposes this. The NRA gentleman was called out of the room, and he's authorized me to tell you that the NRA opposes it as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Olson. Representative Cornish.
Representative Simonson, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things. I think there's just too much tweaking and fixing to do to make the bill feasible, but I also wanted to tell you that you did a good job in presenting your bill, and I know that your intent was pure and the worries that go along with it, but I just wanted to let you know that for your first time presenting, or one of the few first times, you did a good job.
Thank you, Representative Cornish. Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I was going to say that too, Representative Cornish. I want to commend Representative Simonson and Schoen for bringing this bill to us. I think it's been very enlightening and a very, very constructive discussion. I've learned a lot about body armor because I don't wear any body armor. I've got lots of guns, but no body armor. But this is what it's all about. That's what this panel, that's what this committee is designed to do, is to examine these issues thoroughly, get the testimony from the public, look at a bill, tweak a bill, and whether this thing makes the floor, makes it out of committee, I don't know. But I think this is the process, and I think it's very good, and I think you guys have done a good job. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Uglum. I forgot there was one more testifier. So please introduce yourself for the record. Welcome to the committee.
Hello, my name is Eric McLeod. I'm a criminal defense attorney in the city of St. Paul. So, hello. This is my first time speaking ever, so I apologize if I'm a little nervous. But I want to speak specifically about certain issues in this bill. On its face, I definitely need to do more research on this, and I intend to submit a written brief on this. But immediately, just looking at it, it is overbroad. First off, when you look at Section B, and it speaks of a dangerous weapon, I don't think, unless you want to clarify, that includes protection from a firearm. I think that would also include protection from a knife or a club or anything like that. Now, so if you're talking body armor, that would also include protection from something such as a weapon like a knife. Now you're talking leather jackets, because that does offer some protection against a knife attack. That's just one issue with a dangerous weapon. The second issue is It doesn't really say specifically what the body armor is, just any material or combination of materials to prevent, resist, or deflect. Well, that could include just about anything. Yeah. All you have to do is watch television. I don't know if anybody watches the television show Mythbusters. No. But they recently did a show where they were checking out different types of armor from the old days to the present day, and they found that a sufficient amount of cardboard could actually repel knife attacks, gun attacks. So you're talking virtually anything under the sun that is sufficient to protect you would fall under this. So anybody who works as a performer would have to get a permit, and would that be considered a sufficient use under that? You know, everybody at the Renaissance Festival, you know, the people who joust or wear chainmail now are going to have to get a permit just to wear it. It doesn't, you know, they're just out there performing, having a good time. I don't know if they necessarily need to pay $100 to own those materials. Martial artists have equipment so that they can spar. For instance, I know that martial artists who train with samurai swords, they have equipment so that they can spar with that, not get injured. Same with fencing. Would that fall under, you know, this law here? So that's the first section of being overbroad. The second part about being overbroad is it doesn't prevent crime. As I heard before, there's already laws on the books that if you have body armor in commission of a crime, that's illegal. But what this is actually making illegal is for the average person to simply walk around with this. You know, complete law-abiding citizen. And that part doesn't really make sense to me. If you are a law-abiding citizen, and even if you have a permit requirement and you create this, if you're a law-abiding citizen and you walk around with this, what harm are you actually doing to other people? So it really only prevents lawful use, because the criminal use is already illegal. So, you know, I'm in favor of making it illegal for criminals to own this, convicted felons and the like. The other issue is the may issue versus shall issue, which Professor Olson had already spoken about. And that just means that it really needs to be an objective standard. And the objective standard would be, is there a criminal record? Is there a record of insanity or a commitment? That is the best way to do this. If you put it in the opinions of a person, albeit a law enforcement officer, to determine if your threat is sufficient enough to warrant this, that could lead to someone getting denied and could lead to that person getting injured or killed. And that would be very, very sad to me, to have somebody who themselves saw a threat, went out and did everything legal to get body armor to protect them from that threat, were denied, and then they got harmed. That would be a tragedy. So that concludes this particular bill. I understand that there was a little bit of leeway earlier talking about bills. I was not in the room. I was in the overflow room when we talked about Bill 285. If I would like to ask for a little bit of time to speak about that. Otherwise, I will just submit my written brief.
Yeah, go ahead and take a couple minutes.
Okay. So, as a defense attorney, I would like to directly address the issue that of the judge's order. I guess it's between commitment and the actual when the person gets committed. I don't necessarily think I'm going to do sufficient research on this. I'm going to dive into this. But at this point, that part is not necessary. I had a person call in recently, a potential client, who had been denied a permit because he had had a DUI years ago. And through that process, he was court-ordered to have treatment. And he was denied because he didn't have a certificate that the treatment had completed. Now, he had completed the treatment, and all he had to do was get that certificate and then supply it so that he could get it. But we're not talking about commitment here. The police can already deny the average citizen, someone who's applying for a permit to purchase a weapon, they can already deny that based on treatment. You know, as long as they see it in the record that treatment was ordered, they can deny that permit and they can deny that sale. So I don't understand necessarily why this has to be added to the law if it's already something that the police can do to deny someone being able to purchase a firearm. So that's the first part. The second part is the domestic loophole regarding the strangling. My understanding is that's already a felony, and under the law, as I read it, the strangulation is already covered in the ban of people to own firearms. So I think that's not necessary. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. McLeod. You're correct. It is a felony, but it's not listed as a crime of violence in statute, and that's what the county attorney was trying to address.
Okay, well, if it's not a crime of violence, it still actually takes away the rights to own a gun. And all that means is that after the fact, years after, if somebody wants to own a gun, they still have to petition the court to be able to get that right back. So they do lose that right automatically.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McLeod, for your testimony. Members, we're going to recess now until 6 o'clock or whatever time session is over. Thanks for your patience. We have a Simonson bill, and then we have a Houseman bill for this evening, and hopefully we won't go too late. We're in recess.